Hi, this is Martin from Martin's Engine Services. In the work for today, I've got a 2015 mg3 1.5 petrol. It's covered just over 50,000 miles. It's due an MOT tomorrow, and I'm just carrying out a few preliminary repairs, mostly just the front suspension arm rear wishbone bushes, which were an advisory last year. I've done this side, fairly straightforward job, nothing too horrible at all. You've got a bolt through the front, which goes into a welded trap nut, and nut and bolt through the back, and the lower ball joint is retained by 3 bolts, which makes life much easier, especially if you've got to change ball joint in the future. I replaced the brakes on this about 6 months ago now. Again, it's another straightforward job, nothing horrible about it, and it's, as is most modern cars, have a pretty much similar layout. The car itself, I think the owners had since it was practically new, and I've got to say it has been an exceptionally reliable car by all accounts. And I'd never worked on this up until last year when I actually did a timing chain job on it. But I'd never seen one before, and I thought I'd give it an honest inspection and opinion and drive it. And I can't help but say I've been rather impressed by the whole thing. The fit and finish seems nice, all the panel gaps seem very good, the interior seems well put together. It doesn't rattle like a lot of much more expensive European cars. The general construction of it seems very good. The locking rail is actually metal, not plastic. It's all pretty rigid and pretty sturdy stuff. It's all bolted together nicely. Likewise, the panel gaps, I say, are exceptionally good. Like the fit and finish on this plastic bumper and everything is much better than most you seem to see these days. The timing chain is actually a known failure on these engines. They stretch and cause timing codes. Although the engine seems to run quite well, but eventually once it reaches a certain point it will go into limp mode. The actual job itself is fairly straightforward really. There's nothing horrible about it. You do need a couple of special tools which we'll come to in a moment. Once you remove this huge airbox system which incorporates the cover and everything, there's quite a lot of access to the top of the engine, and likewise there's plenty of access down the front here as well. The wheel arch liner on this is easy to get out, but unlike a lot of manufacturers, they've actually bolted it in, and so likewise the under tray is bolted on, so no horrible plastic clips. So it all seems to be a little more sturdy than most. On the subject of bolts, something I found most amusing, where a lot of manufacturers maybe use 8 or 9 bolts around the cam cover, there was actually, I think it was 19 bolts around this cover, and the lower front timing cover plate actually had 16 bolts around it, and I thought they may have got a little bit carried away and slightly over-engineered it, but again, you can't really fault them for that. Internally, having looked at the top end of the engine, the camshaft seemed very robust size and quality, and it all seemed nice and clean in there, although this vehicle has had a lot of routine maintenance. Once you've actually accessed the timing chain from the top, you have to remove this aluminium plate here to fully access the top pulleys, and then there's a large plate further down you unbolt which you renew and comes in the kit, and that gives you complete access to the oil pump chain, and you can actually see right into the bottom end of the engine, right to the bottom of the sump. You can check for any sludge or any bits of debris or anything if you had lost the timing guide. But the accessibility into the bottom of the engine is quite remarkable. It's actually quite a clever design. Access wise, the engine bay is exceptionally well laid out compared to a lot of equally sized European, say, and maybe Japanese vehicles, and has some actually very nice touches. One particular thing I really like is this clutch slave cylinder mounted on the outside of the gearbox. 2 bolts, 1 pipe, quick and easy to change. No messing around ripping gearboxes out and all the associated work involved to replace the eccentric slave cylinder. There is absolutely heaps of space around the gearbox. As you can see, you great big space down here to the under tray, and it's likewise on the back of the gearbox and also to the chassis rail. There's an awful amount of room available. If you had to remove a gearbox, it looks absolutely a dream compared to most front-wheel drive vehicles. It seems quite impressive the way they've actually got everything laid out so neatly. It's got a very German touch about how it's all laid out and very logical. And something else which is nice to see on modern cars is you can actually A, see the alternator, and B, possibly change it without stripping the whole vehicle down from the tailgate forward to reach the alternator buried on the back of the engine. Considering the reputation sometimes of the say, how do we put this politely, interesting Chinese manufacturing, there's nothing on here that I look at and think, ooh, that's nasty or it's going to fail. I guess lots of other people may have had problems with them, but I can only speak as I find. The vehicle drives very nicely, the gearbox is very nice, it rides actually exceptionally well and actually feels a lot more solid than maybe the equivalent Corsa or similar. It's got some funky styling with these sort of almost like retro style alloy wheels, and you do get some rather funky stripes and bits and pieces on the on it. It kind of hankers back to the British Leyland interior colours, I seem to remember, on the old Allegros and stuff. Parts wise, a lot of people have said to me, oh, you'll never get parts for them, it'll take forever, blah blah blah. But I get these parts from Brown and Gammon's MG down in Baldock, Hertfordshire. They've been doing MGs, the classic ones, for many years, and are a current main dealer for the new models. Very helpful people, and you ring them up, and 9 times out of 10, it'll be here next morning. And they keep a comprehensive range in stock. Their website's also very good because you do get a full layout of all the parts, so you can see exactly what you need, and all the prices are on there, no hidden surprises. Back to the timing chain job, the timing tools required, there's a steel bar that goes across the top of the cams with basically 2 pins that drop into 2 holes in the cam, into each cam. So me being me, I machined up 2 stainless steel pins and then drilled a steel bar to fit, which locked the camshafts nicely. There's no chance of them being out of position because both the holes must be vertical and then they can't actually physically move. And the flywheel timing pin is basically a bent piece of rod, very similar to the Peugeot setup. You have to hook it in and come in from the angle, but that works fine. And there is actually a tool to hold the front pulley when you tighten it up to stop it rotating against the timing pin, which is basically a steel disc, 2 bolts go in the pulley, and an extension handle on it. Again, didn't take me long to make it, and I kind of like doing that sort of thing. I always think, why, when you can make something in the workshop, crack out the lathe and the milling machine for half an hour, find it very satisfying, and I've got the tools for another day. The wishbone bushes are a pretty straightforward operation to change, just require pressing in and out. I've got one next door on the bench. Beautiful day today, it's absolutely pouring down and it's lovely and cold. The picture actually looks a lot better than it does. Actually looks to make things look quite lovely actually. It ain't. Anyhow, back to the wishbone. You can see the bushes here have completely and utterly fell apart. The middles have left home. They weren't actually making that much noise considering, and the car still drove fine, didn't wander or anything. There's no signs of any abnormal tyre wear, but I think they possibly have reached the end of their life. I like to, wherever possible, press out the centre of a bush and then caxel very carefully through the outer part and then tap it out rather than press them out, especially when you've got a very small contact area such as this, which is what, 8-9 millimeters, and that's all the bush is retained by. And obviously if you press them out when there's a rust build up, you could stretch this hole slightly and the bush will not be a tight fit in the arm. I mean, fortunately the design of the arm is such that the bolt obviously goes through and pinches between the subframe. The arm would just simply move up and down on the bush and rattle around, which is not ideal, but you couldn't actually lose the suspension. I also, when I removed the old bushes, I marked the position of the voided section. I chalked it here and here on the new one, and likewise on the old one. So I ensure that the voided part of the bush is in exactly its right orientation. Because obviously if you put it in that way around, it will create very interesting handling because the arm will be able to move in a direction it wasn't designed to. The bushes are in not quite handy, but they obviously have a top and bottom, which is fairly obvious when you take them out which way round they go. It's not too difficult to work it out from the old one if you should accidentally forget to take a note. It's also why I only ever like to do one side at a time, because you've always got a reference. I also always put a little bit of Loctite retainer on these just to make sure, but they did go in nice and square, and they pressed in. It took a couple of tons to get them in, which is nice. There's no problems there. I know a lot of people would automatically just change this arm, but I think the arms are about £80–90 complete from MG. Nothing wrong with this bush whatsoever. It's, in fact, there's a lot of mud and whatnot on this arm, but it's nothing else wrong with it. It's in perfectly serviceable condition. So I've always been a believer of why throw away a perfectly good part that's serviceable for the want of one simple replacement part. I don't mind spending an extra time replacing parts like this, because I hate to see perfectly safe components simply thrown away. And there's the added cost to the customer, which in the current environment, I think every little bit helps, to quote a famous supermarket advert. As you see, it's a very simple bolt-on setup for the ball joint. Nothing fancy about any of it. It's a fairly robustly made arm, it's surface rust, but it's well braced, it's all seam welded up, and it seems quite a functional item compared to some of the others. And we've all seen some pretty rusty suspension parts at it's coming up 10 years old now, and I think this is held up well. Likewise, the rest of the underside of the vehicle appears to have held up very well. There doesn't seem to be any major problems with any signs of any corrosion in the floor or the seals or the chassis rails or anything. Most of the suspension's got this fairly standard sort of surfacey flaky on it, but there's nothing on there that looks like it could be a serious failure for the future, which is rather encouraging. I seem to remember a few of the old VW Polo lower arms decomposing nicely from the inside and falling to bits, and various other, and of course the famous Corsa subfront subframe saga, which again is a fairly avoidable situation, but obviously shows the poor quality of metal involved. I know this car probably creates mixed opinions with people. Oh, it's not a real MG and all the rest of it, but I can only speak as I find, and to say that I can't really see any major fault with it. Say the lady who owns it's had no issues with it at all. It's been a great car, so what more can you want? If it gets you where you want to go and it does the job, and hey ho. I guess you can live with the slightly funky styling, and again you see the slightly interesting coloured mirrors. You can't really miss it in a car park, but yeah, I quite like it actually. So there we go. It's really not the most exciting job on the planet, changing wishbone bushes, but it's a nice straightforward mechanical job. Doesn't require any great specialist tools or anything. And it's one of those jobs that's a nice little turnover for the workshop. So hopefully it'll go straight for the MOT. I can't see any other problems at all, so we should be all good to go. Anyhow, hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching, and please feel free to subscribe and leave any comments you may have. Bye for now.